this. So in any case, what I started to say is welcome to this session about the new functionality, new features that we have been adding. And the reason behind this session is because we noticed after communicating with a couple of our customers that not everyone is aware about the new functionality, the new exciting functionality we have been adding lately. And so we're looking for additional channels and venues that we can use in order to communicate with you guys what we have been up to on the system. So today I want to talk about three main features. Basically one called call to test or called steps. The second one is step parameters, and the third one is going to be tested permutations. Okay, and again, all of that is documentation that has already been shared with you, but I do want to review them very quickly. Now, this is a webinar format, which means that you cannot ask any questions by talking, but you still have a Q&A chat that if something is not clear or if you want to ask any questions, then I will be looking into the chat and answering it as we go along. So let's start talking about the features that we added. The first two, actually, we're going to be talking on the concept of the test library. And I do want to start with the very first one, which is calling steps from another test. And the scenario for this one is very simple. Imagine that, I don't know, obviously everyone is testing a different system, but let's go on a generic one. Let's say that we're testing a website, okay, and maybe a web application. And the first step that we want to do in most of our test cases is going to be to kick open a browser and log into the system, okay? So traditionally, what we would have asked you to do is to basically write that step or that couple of steps in every single test that you have. Start your test by saying log into the system. And so you're going to be repeating those test cases multiple times. So that's already a hassle. Even worse is what happens if, because one reason or another, you choose or your company chooses to modify the login procedure. Instead of a two-step login, you have a three-step login. And all of a sudden, you need to go over every single test case and modify those steps. So we're basically trying to save you that hassle. The way that this new feature works, let me just explain it here. Let's say that I want to create a new test in here. And let's say that the test is to verify the reports are working correctly. So let's call these verify reports on the system. And without filling anything else, let's say that I want to go and start adding steps into my test case. And the first step, as I mentioned, is to log into the system. So instead of adding steps here, open browser, log into the system, I'm actually going to call steps from another test. So I can press in here. And if I know the ID of the test that I'm looking for, again, that might be the case, just press here the ID that you're looking for. Or if you want to search for it, you press in here, and using the filters in here, you can basically look for any test that you want to look into. In this case, we want to add this test, valid login. So I just press here. And you can see that what has been added in here are not the steps for my test case. It's a link to that test case, and that's on purpose because, again, we don't want to add the steps just yet. We want to do it when you start running the test and tests and runs. Okay, so here it's only basically a pointer to that test. Obviously, after I save my changes, if I go into the steps and press on this, this will be a link that would take me into the specific test case that we have in here. Okay, so this is what it's called, a call to steps from another test, and I will show you how that looks once we start running. It's very simple, but also very, very useful. Now, obviously, you can have as many calls as you want in your test case. You can call a test that is calling on another test, so you can have recursiveness within your test case calling and stuff like that. Now, the second feature that we added is actually along the same lines. We're working here very much on making your test cases more effective, maybe more efficient, by giving you additional features in here. The second feature is step parameters. And the way that that works is, let's say that we want to add a new step in here. And we said that what I want to see is to verify my reports in here. So let's say that I add a new step. And so the next step will be go to the reporting module. And again, I'm doing something very quickly, so I'm not even going to add descriptions in here. Let's say that I want to add here, and I say verify that the report for, let's say, expenses works correctly. Sorry, correctly. And again, let's add here maybe the description will be go to the report for expenses, verify it works. Okay, it's very simple and schematic steps. So This is a way that I may choose to write my test case, but maybe I do not want to specify just now which report do I want to add. Maybe I want to test in different test sets, different report types and stuff like that. So instead of adding here the name of the report or quote unquote hard coding the specific report that I'm going to be adding here. So maybe what I want to do, I want to create a parameter. So instead of writing here the expenses, let's say report for, let's say that we add here a parameter, report underscore type, bracket, bracket. Now, the way that we create a new step is basically by adding curly bracket, then any word that I want to add in here, or again, any string that I want to add in here, and then bracket, bracket. And what PractiTest will do is when we start running the test, it will render this part as a parameter. So basically, we can add it in here. Now, I don't need to add it only once. You can, again, add it other places. So for example, go to the report for, let's say, in here, we can add it, report type. And by the way, we can even add it on another step if we want. Let's say, export. No. Report type, report. Okay, so we added it in 3 places. Now, let's see how this actually looks within our test sets. So I'm going to be, again, saving my changes here. Remember, we have a call to step here, a regular step, and then a couple of steps with parameters. Now, notice it needs to be exactly the same parameter in here. If we go over to our test sets and runs, okay, and let's say that I want to add here the new test we just created. So just as you would do normally, I'm going to add here verifying reports, add selected test. So the test has been added here. So how do I populate the reports, the parameter? Because up to now, that parameter has not been defined or initialized in here. So first of all, if I was to run my test in here, because I have not initialized my parameter, it will not let me do it. It will say, hey, go ahead and define the parameters in here, and I can press here to define it. But another way, the way that I like more to do it, is define it within your test set. So first of all, remember we can add any columns that we want in here using the columns functionality. So I'm going to press here. Notice that we have the parameters, column or field. I'm just going to drag it here. Once I do it, I can actually see here the parameters. So the way to define my parameters, I can actually do it only on the specific test that I have, or maybe for the whole test set if I want to. So I select all the test cases, and I'm going to press here on these parameters link. And what the system will do, it will bring all those all the parameters that we have within all the test instances within those test sets. So in here, I can just come here and say, let's say report type, and we want to have here the expenses report. Okay, so we update that parameter. I can also see it in here, being report type parameter. By the way, a question that I was asked earlier today, what happens if I have another instance with another parameter in there? That's perfectly okay. Again, doing exactly the same, I'm going to add the same test again in here. And now instead of adding here the expenses report, let's say that I'm just going to select this guy here. And this is going to be for, let's say, I don't know, assistance report. And again, notice when I hover in here, I can see that the report type in this first test is going to be expenses. The one on the second test is going to be assistance. Now, let's run our test to see how it looks. So when I press here on run, I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, remember that we had a call to test or a call to steps. Then we can see them in these first 2 steps that have been dynamically added. Remember, when we press on run, we will go over to the test library, see which are the steps that we have on the test case, and just inject them here. So we can always recognize a call to test by seeing that the name of the test will appear here in brackets, valid login, test number 1, and then the name of the step. Everything else is just the same. Also here, brackets, name of the test, of the step, and everything is the same. And if we go over to our parameters, remember this one doesn't have anything, but in here we can see that the report type has been supplanted by expenses here, and obviously expenses here. And again, this is a regular test, so you can just, again, pass whatever you want, fail whatever you want, block whatever you want. And once we're done, again, remember, we're here working on the expense report. If we go over to our next test, then it will look exactly the same, with the difference that instead of expenses, we'll have here the assistance parameter all around. Okay, so again, this is the way that these first two features look like, and those are the call to test and the step parameters. Now, I want to show you a third. I also see a question. I will go over it a little bit later, but just to show you the third feature that I wanted to show you, and that is something called permutations. Now, the idea behind permutations also came from a couple of requests, or the same request from a couple of customers, where each one of their individual testing approach, they had a need to create many permutations of test sets based on one or a number of test sets on different, let's say, configurations or platforms. And for one of them, it was multiple languages that they were testing. Another one was multiple devices and phones and operating systems and browsers. But the request was the same. They want to be able to select one test set or a number of test sets and just create a number of permutations, just like they can do with cloning. But it's many cloning with many different permutations, and they want to be able to do it at once. So we added that feature. It's a pretty cool one. And it's called permutations. So I select either one or a number of test sets in here, and I press here on my permutations. And what happens is that when I press that, the system will fetch all of the fields, list fields that I have within my test sets, okay, depending on your customizations, obviously. So I have the assign to field and the version field, but the ones that interest me in this case, it's, let's say I want to create permutations for browsers and operating systems. So I can either select all of my browsers in here and maybe just, again, select these ones manually, whatever I want to do. And I start by selecting the values that are relevant for those permutations I want to create. And again, remember, you're going to be able to select your own custom fields. Once we're done selecting in this first step, we go over to our next step in here. And in here, what we get, it's basically a combination or all the possible permutations that can be created based on the combinations in there. Now, obviously, there are some combinations that are not valid, like Mac on IE or IE on Linux that we don't want to test. So we can select all of them and not select a number of them, or maybe we say, hey, you know what? I'm going to select this one here and this one here, and let's say this one here and this one here, and this one here. So again, select any permutations, and we'll create test sets based on these combinations that you have in here. Very important, whenever you're creating permutations, you might be working with a number of test sets, many test instances, so you can always see here how many test sets and how many instances overall you will be creating. So that, again, you don't create a lot of stuff unnecessarily, okay? So you get that in here. Once we're done, we selected all the permutations we want to create. Then we press here on Finish. And this is going, it's something that will be actually running behind the scenes because it might take a lot of time for that, but in this case, it was relatively quick. And I can see here, notice all the ones that has, okay, version 1 also here, but over here I can see the different permutations that we have. So these are my two test sets for the combinations of Windows with Chrome, Windows with Opera, Windows with Safari, Mac and Opera, and Linux and Chrome. So we created all of these new test sets based on the two originals ones that we had in here, and obviously very, very quickly. Now, in addition of having that information in here, obviously this also was added to your fields here. And so if you have any filters already created within your test sets, then the test cases will automatically be populated wherever you actually want them to be. And from here on, it's a regular test set. Just go ahead and run it just as you would have done before. And again, the same goes, if in this scenario we did it for operating system and browser, you can do it for languages, you can do it for versions, for supports, for devices, whatever you have in there. Okay, so there's another feature, but I want to go over one of the questions that we have in here. Let me just read it very quickly. I think that I already answered the question. Was a question of how can you actually pass those parameters in here. Remember, when you add those parameters, then you can just add them into the test sets and you have them in here. Now, something very important that I didn't mention, but you will see it. Remember that whenever you're going to be cloning test sets, if you defined information for the test instances, then that's also going to be cloned. In this case, remember that we had here the two test cases with the parameters. So if I come here, then you will see that those parameters were also cloned. Okay, so if you have one test set where those credentials, for example, or those parameters appear in here, when you start cloning or creating permutations, you will also create those definitions in here. So again, we also put that into the definition of the parameters so you can actually work with that. Okay, and that was regarding to the question that we were asked before. There's another question here. Why is the assigned to already assigned? Again, it's only the way that this demo was selected. It really depends on how they want to work. In this demo project that I have, we already assigned these guys in here. But if these were not to be assigned and you clone them, then they're not assigned. Okay, remember that everything depends on the way that you're going to be working. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to show you, it's not really a new feature per se, but it's functionality that we added, and it's very important. Some people are actually asking for it, and it was keyboard shortcuts. For those of you who are familiar, keyboard shortcuts means to be able to reach places within the application or perform specific actions without using the mouse. So if you want to activate, those are not active by default, but if you want to activate them, within your settings, you need to go over to your personal settings and make sure that this flag in here, this checkbox, enable keyboard shortcuts, has been turned on. Once it has been turned on, if you want to see the keyboard shortcuts that we have on the system, then simply press the question mark. Okay, and you can see it here. You can go to specific modules. You can create new entities directly from here. If you're running a test case, then you can pass or fail, do whatever you want to do for your steps. You can also edit names, attachments, everything is in there. And we also made sure that the top order to create new test cases, everything has been solved and fixed. So it should be a lot faster, quicker, and easier to basically work if you want to only with your keyboard and not use your mouse in any case. So again, if you want to reach your keyboard shortcuts, go to your personal settings on any project, enable it. It will be for all the projects in your account. And then if you want to reach them, just to know which ones you have available, press the question mark anywhere, and you will be able to reach that in here. Okay, I see some additional questions, so let me just go over this. One question here about the call steps from another test. What happens if the original test case of the steps in the original test case have been modified? That's actually a great question. Remember, as long as I haven't started running my test, then we have not taken those steps. So let's say that, as I was saying, maybe right now someone will go into my definitions of the test library, and within the valid login, they say, hey, you know what? We want to add another step between step 1 and step 2. Just going to add it here just to show it to you. Let's call this step in the middle that we added in here. And once I save my changes, if I go back to any of the test sets where we added that call to test, if I come here and just run it, then you will see that the step in the middle has been added dynamically in here. Okay, so as long as you have not pressed the run button, then we will continue waiting until that last moment to bring those steps. So if you modified something along the way, then it will also be modified for your run. Another question here, just a second. There's another question here on where can we actually add the parameters on the level when the script is called. Remember, guys, for the parameters initiation, again, if you do not, let's say that I go into a case, people are saying, hey, maybe I want to wait until the last minute to provide that version for my parameters and not to populate it here, okay? So if you did not populate it using these run parameters, you can still do it whenever you press the run button. The system will prompt you to add that information. It won't let you go into the actual steps without adding that, but you don't necessarily need to work with the parameters here and select and do all that stuff. You can do it until the last minute as well if you wish, okay? And again, these are something very important. These are enterprise level features. So if you don't have access to your enterprise level features because you're working right now on the professional level license and you do want to try this for a couple of days, even for a month, just let us know. We will activate these features for you so that you can try them. And again, decide if you want to upgrade your license. But again, I do suggest very, very warmly, go ahead and play with this. I believe that they provide a lot of added value. And again, this is only part of the stuff that we're actually adding. And we will continue adding a lot more functionality in the coming weeks, in the coming months. I hope that we will be able to surprise you with some pretty, pretty cool features that will be hitting the streets very, very soon. Okay, so if anyone has any additional questions, please go ahead and ask them. If not, I want to thank everyone who took the time to join us and to see these features. And again, we have been recording these sessions and we will make them publicly available. we're here to help in any case. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye, and thanks a lot.